My name is Rabbi David Goldstein. I am 56 years old. I lead Congregation Beth Shalom in Manhattan, one of the most theologically conservative Orthodox synagogues in New York City. I have spent 28 years guiding my community through the ancient laws of the Torah, teaching that the covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people is eternal, particular, and irreducible to any universal framework that would dilute its specificity. I am not a man who converts. I am not a man who compromises. I am not a man who stands at the tomb of a Catholic saint and weeps. On October 12, 2024, exactly 18 years to the day after Carlo Acutis died, I did all three. Let me be precise about what I mean when I say I wept, because I want you to understand the full weight of that word for a man like me. I had not wept in public since my father's funeral 20 years ago. I am the son of a Holocaust survivor. I was raised in a tradition that understands grief as something to be honored privately, contained within the specific liturgical structures that Jewish law provides for mourning. I do not weep at strangers' tombs. I do not weep in front of crowds of Catholic pilgrims who are watching a kippah-wearing rabbi, with an expression somewhere between bewilderment and astonishment. I wept, and I will tell you exactly why. I arrived in Assisi that October as a skeptic. I arrived as an academic. I hold a chair in comparative messianism at Columbia University, and I had received a research grant to study what I privately referred to as the Carlo Acutis phenomenon. I was interested in Carlo not as a saint, but as a case study in contemporary Catholic hagiography, the process by which the Church constructs and promotes figures of devotion in the digital age. I had published papers on similar subjects. I was, I believed, comprehensively equipped to observe and document what was happening at that tomb without being touched by it. I believed this the way a person believes that they are immune to something they have never encountered. What happened at that tomb at 3:30 in the afternoon on October 12, 2024, dismantled in approximately 20 minutes something I had spent 28 years constructing. Not my faith. I am still an Orthodox rabbi. Not my theology. I still believe everything the Torah teaches. What was dismantled was a wall I had built between my tradition and every other tradition, a wall I had justified intellectually and defended academically and experienced, if I am truthful, as a form of loneliness so familiar I had stopped recognizing it as loneliness. What I am about to tell you happened. I am a rabbi, which means I am professionally obligated to say true things. I am an academic, which means I am professionally trained to distinguish between what I observed and what I inferred. I will give you both what I saw and what I have concluded from it, and I will leave you to make of it what you will. But I want to tell you this first. I came to Assisi to write a paper. I left Assisi carrying a truth that has reorganized my life. I grew up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, the grandson of a man who had survived Auschwitz, and the son of a man who had rebuilt his life around the absolute certainty that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had kept his covenant even through the ovens of Europe. My grandfather Baruch Goldstein, may his memory be a blessing, used to say that the survival of the Jewish people was itself the most undeniable miracle in human history, and that anyone who needed additional evidence for the existence of Hashem had simply not been paying attention to the previous 3,000 years. I grew up inside this certainty. It was not naive certainty. My grandfather had the numbers tattooed on his forearm and the nightmares that woke him 3 or 4 times a week, and the quality of hard-won faith that comes from a man who has looked into the face of radical evil and chosen, deliberately and repeatedly, to believe in radical goodness anyway. My faith was built on his. It was built on something real, but it was also built on separation. Jewish law, halakha, establishes clear boundaries between what is permitted and what is not, between the Jewish people and the nations, between pure and impure, between sacred and profane. These distinctions are not arbitrary. They carry the weight of thousands of years of legal reasoning and theological reflection. They were developed in part as a survival mechanism. The Jewish people maintained their identity through exile and persecution precisely because they maintained their distinctiveness. The wall was not merely theological, it was existential. I studied at Yeshiva University and then at the Jewish Theological Seminary, completing my doctorate in comparative messianism at the age of 31. My dissertation examined Christian and Jewish messianic claims in parallel, not in order to find common ground, but in order to demonstrate with scholarly precision why the Christian claims failed to meet the criteria established by the Hebrew prophets. It was a rigorous piece of work. My advisor, one of the foremost scholars of Second Temple Judaism in America, called it a model of engaged polemical scholarship. I am not ashamed of that work. I believed then, as I believe now, that the truth matters, and that intellectual rigor in service of the truth is a form of holiness. What I did not understand, until much later, was that rigor can also become a kind of armor, that the very precision of academic argument can be deployed not in pursuit of truth, but in defense against it. I took the pulpit at Congregation Beth Shalom in 1996. We are a congregation of approximately 400 families, mostly professional class, mostly second and third generation American, with a significant representation of academics, lawyers, and physicians who appreciate a rabbi, who can engage with secular intellectual culture without abandoning Orthodox practice. I am known, in our community and beyond it, for sermons that combine Talmudic scholarship with rigorous engagement with contemporary philosophy, science, and ethics. I have appeared on panels at Harvard and Yale and Georgetown. I have published 7 books. I say all of this not to impress you. I say it so you understand what kind of man I was when I arrived in Italy. I was a man who was very good at knowing things, a man who had been rewarded his entire professional life for the quality and precision of his knowledge, a man whose identity was substantially constituted by his capacity to analyze, to critique, to see through the surface of things to their structural logic, a man who had spent 28 years as the intellectual and spiritual authority for 400 families and who had, without fully recognizing it, come to experience the maintenance of that authority as a form of spiritual practice in itself. When the research grant from Columbia arrived in the summer of 2024, I was immediately interested. Carlo Acutis was scheduled to be canonized, made a full saint, in the near future, and I had been following the process with the particular interest of someone who studies messianic and hagiographic patterns across traditions. The Carlo Acutis case was genuinely unusual. He had died in 2006 at 15 years old, been beatified in 2020, and the process toward full canonization had moved with unusual speed. He was young, digitally sophisticated, and his devotion had spread rapidly through precisely the platforms, social media, YouTube, Catholic influencer networks, that traditional forms of religious promotion had failed to penetrate. From an academic perspective, he was fascinating. From the perspective of a skeptical Orthodox rabbi, he was a perfect case study in manufactured sanctity. My hypothesis, which I had articulated clearly in my grant application, was as follows. Carlo Acutis represented a new model of Catholic saint-making, one that exploited the psychological appeal of adolescent mortality combined with modern digital aesthetics to create a devotional figure capable of attracting the secular digital generation back to institutional religion. The Church, I argued, had identified a genuine cultural need among young people for spiritual figures who did not seem incompatible with contemporary life, and had found in Carlo, with his jeans and his sneakers and his website about Eucharistic miracles, precisely the right vehicle for meeting that need. The miracles attributed to his intercession would, I expected to find, be explicable through well-documented psychological mechanisms of belief confirmation and retrospective attribution. I was thorough. Before departing for Italy, I read everything available about Carlo in English, Italian, and French. I read the beatification documentation. I read accounts of the miracles attributed to him. I read profiles of his family, his school friends, his parish priest. I watched videos of his mother, Antonia Salzano, speaking about her son. I watched them with the analytical detachment of an ethnographer, noting her rhetorical patterns, her emotional appeals, the way she constructed Carlo's holiness retrospectively from the ordinary materials of his adolescent life. I did not allow myself to be moved by any of it. I departed for Rome on October 8th and drove north to Assisi on October 11th, arriving the evening before the anniversary of Carlo's death. The town was full of pilgrims. I estimated several thousand, many of them young, many international. I moved through them with my notebook and my recorder, cataloging what I observed. The merchandise at the souvenir stalls, the expressions on pilgrims' faces, the languages in which they prayed, the ages and apparent social demographics of the devotional crowd. I was efficient and I was thorough, and I believed, completely protected by the thick glass of my methodology. On the morning of October 12th, I attended a Mass at the Basilica of St. Francis, not out of any devotional interest, but because I wanted to observe how Carlo's anniversary was being liturgically framed by the institutional church. The homily was delivered by a young Franciscan priest and focused on Carlo's synthesis of digital fluency and Eucharistic devotion. I noted the rhetorical moves, the audience responses, the way the priest positioned Carlo as a model for young people navigating faith in the digital age. I was taking notes throughout. I was doing my job. In the early afternoon I walked to the sanctuary of the Eremo delle Carceri where Carlo's tomb was housed. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. The sanctuary was crowded with pilgrims marking the anniversary. I stood at the edge of the crowd for a time, observing the tears, the prayers, the photos, the small offerings left at the tomb. I noted the diversity of the crowd: Italians, Brazilians, Filipinos, Americans, Poles, Mexicans. Young people who looked like university students kneeling beside elderly nuns, families with small children. I was wearing my black kippah and my tzitzit, clearly identifiable as Jewish. Several pilgrims glanced at me with expressions of curiosity or mild surprise. I did not explain myself. I moved through the crowd toward the tomb. At 3:30 in the afternoon, I reached the glass enclosure where Carlo's body lay. I stood before it for a moment, recording what I saw. A young man, dressed in jeans and a plaid shirt, his sneakers visible beneath the display glass. He looked exactly as described in every account I had read: at peace, composed, preserved with what the Church describes as the incorruptibility of a saint. I noted professionally that the conditions of preservation in the display case were controlled, that the lighting was arranged for maximum devotional effect, that the positioning of the body was clearly deliberate. I reached out and touched the glass. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I have been precise about everything else, and this deserves the same rigor. When my hand touched the glass of Carlo Acutis' tomb at 3:30 in the afternoon on October 12, 2024, I felt something that I had never felt before in 56 years of life. 28 years of rabbinical leadership and 3 decades of scholarly engagement with religious experience across traditions. I felt seen, not observed, not watched. Seen. In the complete sense, the sense that means the full reality of who you are is known and accepted by the one who is seeing you. It is a feeling I had read about in mystical literature across traditions. The Jewish concept of being known by Hashem in one's complete interiority, the Christian language of being beheld by God. I had discussed it academically. I had never felt it. I felt it then. Standing at the tomb of a 15-year-old Catholic boy in Assisi on a Tuesday afternoon, surrounded by pilgrims who were praying in 5 languages, with my notebook in my hand. And then I heard my name. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbeinu David. The greeting came in Hebrew, perfect Hebrew, not the hesitant Hebrew of a student, not the accented Hebrew of a language learner, but the natural, fluent Hebrew of someone for whom it is a living tongue. The pronunciation was impeccable. The phrasing was exactly as we use it. Shalom Aleichem, the traditional greeting, peace be upon you. I turned. Standing beside me was a young man of approximately 15 years. He was slight, dark-haired, with a face that radiated a quality I can only describe as undivided. Entirely present, without the fractured, distracted quality that characterizes most contemporary faces. He was wearing modern sneakers, jeans, and a plain t-shirt. On the t-shirt, in Hebrew letters, were the words Lederek HaKedusha, toward holiness. I responded automatically, before thought Aleichem Shalom. Then thought arrived, and I stared. How do you know Hebrew? I asked. Who are you? My name is Carlo Acutis, he said, in Hebrew. During my life on earth, I catalogued Eucharistic miracles through computer programming because I believed that Hashem, whom your tradition names, uses every means available to reveal himself to his creatures. I was born on the 3rd of May 1991 in London. I died on the 12th of October 2006 from fulminant leukemia. I was beatified on the 10th of October 2020. I looked at the tomb. I looked back at him. My recorder was still running. I checked it instinctively, the reflex of an academic, and then felt the absurdity of that reflex. You are Christian, I said. How can you use the name of Hashem? He smiled. It was the smile of a person who has considered this question thoroughly and arrived at something beyond argument. "Rabbi David," he said, "Hashem is the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob whom your tradition has served for 3,000 years. I did not come to debate the differences between our paths. I came because you are searching for truth, and your search is sincere even when it wears the clothes of skepticism." "I am a researcher," I said. "I am here to study." "You are here," Carlo said gently, "because a wall is painful, even when you build it yourself, even when you believe it is necessary, even when the wall is built from true things." I was silent. In 28 years of rabbinical counseling, I have sat with people in the deepest crises of their lives. I have learned that the most honest thing a person can say is often the thing they have been most successfully avoiding. Carlo had said in 2 sentences the thing I had been avoiding for a very long time. "Rabbi David," he continued, "during my life I never taught that the Church replaced Israel in the covenant with God. I never taught that Jewish tradition was wrong or superseded. I believe that Hashem has many children, and that each tradition carries a portion of the light. The Eucharist I documented was for my tradition, the evidence of God's presence in a particular form in a particular covenant. Your Torah is evidence of God's presence in another form, in another covenant. These are not contradictions. They are what the Kabbalists call tzimtzum, the contraction of the infinite into different forms, so that finite beings can encounter it." I blinked. He had used a precise Kabbalistic term, irat zimtzum, the mystical concept developed by Isaac Luria in the 16th century, describing God's self-contraction to create space for creation. It is not a term that appears in standard Christian theology. It is not a term that a non-specialist would use in this context. "You know Kabbalah," I said. "I know that truth is larger than any tradition's vocabulary for it," he said. "And I know that the Baal Shem Tov and Francis of Assisi were both pointing at the same thing, from different sides of the mountain." I sat down. There was a bench nearby, and I sat on it because my legs had made a decision independent of my mind. Carlo sat beside me. Around us the pilgrims continued their prayers, their photos, their quiet devotions. No one appeared to see him. No one glanced toward us with the curiosity that a 15-year-old boy speaking fluent Hebrew to a kippah-wearing rabbi should reasonably have provoked. "I want to tell you something specific," Carlo said, and his tone shifted. Not more serious, because he had been entirely serious throughout, but more focused, the way a person's tone shifts when they are about to say the thing they came to say. "Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock you will receive a phone call from a family in Rome. Their name is Levi. They have a daughter named Sarah who is 16 years old and is dying of the same leukemia that took me. She has been asking her family for a rabbi who understands both Jewish tradition and Catholic spirituality. She has been following my story and finds it speaks to her, but she does not know how to hold my story inside her Jewish faith." I was watching his face as he spoke. There was nothing theatrical in it, nothing of the performing visionary. He spoke the way someone speaks when they are conveying accurate information. "What am I supposed to do for her?" I asked. "What rabbis have always done," he said. "You will sit with her in her fear and her confusion, and you will tell her the truth. That dying young is not a punishment, and that Hashem sometimes chooses certain souls for brief lives that do more than long ones. You will use my story as an example of how that is possible. And in doing so, you will discover something that no amount of academic research could have given you. That the comfort Hashem sends does not ask permission from our theological categories before arriving." "And if I use your story for a dying Jewish girl," I said slowly, "what am I? What does that make me?" Carlo looked at me with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of a teacher who has asked a student a question and is waiting for them to realize they already know the answer. "A rabbi," he said simply. "A rabbi who has remembered that our father Abraham received Hashem's messengers without first asking for their credentials." A silence fell between us. Around us the pilgrims prayed. A child somewhere in the crowd began to cry softly and was quietly comforted by her mother. The October light fell through the high windows of the sanctuary in long angled columns. "There is something else," Carlo said. during your time of silence after this encounter, Aratinich, and you will have a time of silence, Rabbi David, not of muteness, but of interior stillness. In the weeks and months after you return to New York, you will write something, not an academic paper, a letter. A letter to your congregation explaining what happened here and what it means for your understanding of Hashem's work in the world. This letter will be the most important thing you have ever written. It will reach people whose names you will never know. My congregation is Orthodox, I said. If I tell them I was moved by a Catholic saint, tell them you were moved by Hashem, Carlo said. Tell them that the Holy One, blessed be He, is not confined to the forms we have built for Him. Tell them that Abraham left everything he knew because Hashem called him towards something he could not yet see. Your congregation knows this story. They have always known this story. You are only asking them to live it. He stood. One more thing, he said. On the day Sarah Levi dies, you will be with her. In those final hours, she will ask you to recite the Shema with her. And as you recite the ancient words of your tradition, she will close her eyes. And you will know, with the same certainty that I knew as a 15-year-old boy who was not afraid to die, that Hashem receives His children from every direction. He stepped back, the light around him, and I am aware of how this sounds. I am aware that I am a man with a doctorate from Columbia, and I am writing the word light. The light around him intensified for a moment, then settled, and he was gone. I sat on that bench for a long time. I was holding my recorder. I checked it. The audio was running. I rewound it to the moment I had touched the glass. There was a long section of silence, then my voice saying, Aleichem Shalom. Then more silence. Then at intervals my side of the conversation, questions, responses, long pauses that I could now account for. The other voice was not recorded. I sat with this for a while. Then I began to cry. Not dramatically, not with the theatrical grief of a man performing his conversion. Quietly, with the particular quality of tears that comes when something you have been holding very tightly for a very long time is finally released. Around me, the pilgrims of Carlo Acutis continued their prayers. No one approached me. No one asked if I was all right. I was somehow entirely alone in the middle of a crowd, in the way that one is alone at the precise moment when something important is happening to you. I thought about my grandfather Baruch and the numbers on his forearm. I thought about the wall I had built and the loneliness I had successfully disguised as theological rigor. I thought about 28 years of guiding people through their deepest struggles while maintaining, beneath my rabbinical authority, a private conviction that Hashem was smaller than I had been taught to believe He was. Smaller. Bounded, contained within the specific forms of my specific tradition. I thought about Abraham, who left everything he knew. I stayed at the tomb until the sanctuary was nearly empty. Then I walked back to my hotel, sat at the small desk in my room, opened my laptop, and began to write. And if this channel has been an answer for you, consider leaving a super thanks. This financial help, however small it may seem, sustains this mission and allows us to continue bringing deep and transformative content to more lives that need this word. The phone rang at 10 o'clock the following morning. Precisely 10 o'clock. I was at breakfast in my hotel, not expecting anything, having told no one my phone number in Rome. The number was Italian, unfamiliar. I answered. A woman's voice in Italian accented English, thin with exhaustion. Is this Rabbi Goldstein? From New York? We were given your number by... I'm not sure, someone at the Jewish community in Rome said you were here for research. My name is Rachel Levi. My daughter Sarah is 16 years old and she is very ill, and she has been asking for a rabbi who understands things that we do not understand. I held the phone and felt the floor shift slightly beneath me, the way it shifts when a prediction is fulfilled in precise detail. I will come today, I said. Sarah Levi was small for 16, her dark hair thinned by treatment, her eyes enormous and clear and startlingly intelligent. She was in a private room at the Gemelli Hospital in Rome, surrounded by the careful clutter of a seriously ill person's space, medical equipment and family photographs and small objects brought from home. A stuffed animal at the foot of the bed that she was probably slightly too old for and completely undisguised about keeping. On her bedside table was a printout of a photograph of Carlo Acutis. When I entered, she looked at me with a directness that reminded me of the gaze I had encountered at the tomb. Not the same quality. Hers was human, entirely human. The focused attention of a person for whom time has become precious and who has stopped spending it on things that do not matter. "You're the rabbi from New York," she said in English. "I am." "Do you know about Carlo Acutis?" "I do." She studied me. "Did you go to his tomb?" "Yesterday." Something shifted in her face, a loosening, a relief. "Something happened to you there," she said. It was not a question. I sat in the chair beside her bed. Her mother remained at the edge of the room, present but discreet, giving us space. "Yes," I said, "something happened." "Tell me," Sarah said, and I told her, all of it, exactly as I have told you now. I told her about my skepticism, my academic hypothesis, my 34 years of carefully maintained separation from other traditions. I told her about the touch of the glass and the young man who had appeared beside me speaking Hebrew, and what he had said. I told her about the phone call I had expected. She listened without interrupting. Her hands were folded on the blanket over her lap. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He told you about me?" "Yes." "Do you think—" She paused, choosing carefully. "Do you think Hashem sends the same message through different messengers? Like, he said the same things to both of us through someone we could each understand?" I thought about this. "I think," I said slowly, "that the Torah teaches that Hashem spoke to all the nations at Sinai, not only to Israel. The Talmud says that the voice divided itself into 70 languages. I used to read that as metaphor. I am reading it differently now." She smiled. It was a smile that contained the same quality I had seen in Carlo's smile. Not innocence, which is the absence of knowledge, but something beyond knowledge, the peace that comes on the other side of it. We talked for 4 hours that first day. We talked about her fear, which was real and specific. She was afraid of pain, afraid of absence, afraid of what she was leaving behind. We talked about her faith, which was genuine but young and unequipped for what was being asked of it. We talked about Carlo, his website, his sneakers, his daily mass, his absolute certainty in the face of death that was so thoroughly documented in the accounts of those who had known him. He wasn't afraid, she said. No. How does a 15-year-old not be afraid of dying? I had a doctorate in comparative messianism and 28 years of rabbinical experience, and I had never been asked a question that went so directly to what I actually knew rather than what I could argue. I thought about the answer before I gave it. "I think," I said, "that he was not afraid because he had already given himself entirely to something larger than himself. When you have done that, when the thing you most value is not your own life, but the love that your life is an expression of, then losing your life is less like losing everything and more like—" I searched for the word. "More like coming home." She looked at me. "Is that what the Shema means?" she asked. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Is that what that means? That there's only one thing, and it's Hashem, and we're part of it? I was a rabbi for 28 years, and I understood in that moment that this 16-year-old girl dying of leukemia had understood the Shema more completely than most people who had recited it daily for a lifetime. "Yes," I said, "that is exactly what it means." I visited Sarah every day for the following 6 weeks, until I had to return to New York. After I returned, we continued our conversations through video call, her propped against her pillows in Rome, me at my desk in Manhattan, her parents sometimes present, sometimes not. She had begun a blog that she called, in English, Sarah and Carlo. 2 young people, one God. She wrote about her Jewish faith and her admiration for Carlo with a directness and clarity that was remarkable for any writer, extraordinary for a 16-year-old who was dying. The blog found its audience quickly. Within 3 months, it had been read by more than 40,000 people. Letters arrived from around the world, from Acutis, from Catholic teenagers in Brazil who found a Jewish girl's faith moving, from Jewish families in America who found Carlo's story unexpectedly compelling, from interfaith couples who were navigating the same questions Sarah was navigating and who found in her blog a vocabulary for doing so. She answered every letter personally, in the careful, deliberate way of someone who understands that her time is finite and who has decided to spend it on what matters. I returned to Rome in March. I was with her family when she entered the final phase. In the last hours, her breathing became the slow, irregular rhythm of a body releasing itself. Her parents were on one side of the bed, her younger brother asleep in the chair in the corner. I sat on the other side, her hand in mine, reciting the Psalms of Tehillim in a low voice the way Jews have sat with their dying for 3,000 years. At a certain point her eyes opened. She looked at me with complete clarity, fully present, fully herself, the same enormous dark eyes I had first seen in that Roman hospital room 6 months earlier. "Rabbi," she said, barely audible. "The Shema." I held her hand and I recited the ancient words. "Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad." "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." She whispered it with me, her lips moving. On the word Echad, Yesh Iram, one. She closed her eyes. She did not open them again. I am writing this 3 months after Sarah's death. I am sitting at the desk in my office at Congregation Beth Shalom in Manhattan. On my desk there is a photograph of my grandfather Baruch, and beside it, printed from Sarah's blog, a photograph of Carlo Acutis, in his jeans, in his sneakers, with that expression of undivided peace. I wrote the letter Carlo told me I would write. I addressed it to my congregation, and I told them what happened in Assisi and what I understood from it. I did not soften it, and I did not theologize it into something palatable. I said, "I went to Italy as a skeptic, and I came home as a rabbi who has remembered something we have always known and too often forgotten, that Hashem is not the property of any tradition, and that the Holy One, blessed be He, speaks to every human heart in the language that heart can receive." The response was not what I feared. Some of my congregants were unsettled. I expected that, and I respected it. A few asked for extended conversations about the theological implications, and I had those conversations with the seriousness they deserved. But the majority of the response was something I had not anticipated: relief. As though something that had been held tight could, at last, breathe. One woman, a psychiatrist, a member of the congregation for 15 years, whose daughter had married a Catholic man, and whom she had not spoken to in 3 years over the religious question, came to my office the week after I distributed the letter. She sat across from me and she said, "Rabbi, if Hashem is as large as you are saying, if He is truly large enough to work through all traditions, then is my daughter still inside His covenant even now?" I thought of Carlo speaking to me beside his own tomb, in perfect Hebrew, about the love of Hashem that does not ask permission from our theological categories before arriving. I thought of Sarah reciting the Shema with her last breath and meaning every word. "Yes," I told her. "She is still inside the covenant. She has always been inside the covenant. Hashem does not stop loving His children because they take a different path to Him." They reconciled. The daughter and her Catholic husband came to Shabbat dinner 6 weeks later. I heard about it from the psychiatrist who came to tell me with the expression of a person who has received something they had stopped believing was possible. This is what Carlo Acutis did to my life. He did not make me less Jewish. He made me more Jewish, more faithful to the deepest teachings of my tradition, which have always held that the righteous of all nations have a portion in the world to come, that Hashem's ways are not bound by human categories, that the God of Abraham is large enough to be the God of all Abraham's children, wherever they have wandered, and by whatever names they call Him. I am still an Orthodox rabbi. I still lead Congregation Beth Shalom. I still teach Torah, observe Halasha, pray the ancient prayers in the ancient language. None of that has changed. What has changed is the wall. The wall is gone. And without the wall, I can feel what was always on the other side of it, which is not the alien or the threatening or the theologically incompatible, but simply more of Hashem. More of the one who is, as the Shema teaches, entirely one. Carlo Acutis was a 15-year-old boy who died of leukemia in Monza in October of 2006, and who spent his brief life cataloging evidence of Hashem's presence in the world. He was Catholic, and the evidence he catalogued was Eucharistic, and I am not Catholic, and I do not believe in the Eucharist. These things are true, and I do not erase them. But I was at his tomb on the 18th anniversary of his death, and he spoke to me in Hebrew, and he sent me to a dying girl named Sarah Levi. And I held her hand while she said the Shema, and I know, with a certainty that no academic argument can touch, the certainty of a man who has witnessed something that the Holy One, blessed be He, arranged all of it. Baruch Hashem. Blessed is God. Baruch Hashem. And if this channel has been an answer for you, consider leaving a super thanks. This financial help, however small it may seem, sustains this mission and allows us to continue bringing deep and transformative content to more lives that need this word.